Mom, I saw Dylan's dad make dinner. Like, actually cook, and it was straight fire. He said it was Blue Apron Assemble and Bake. All the ingredients showed up pre-chopped, and he just laid it out on a baking sheet, and no cap. Dinner was on the table in like 25 minutes. Apparently, it's chef designed, and it has like over 40 grams of protein. That's a lot, right? So maybe we try it. Just saying. You can be the next Dylan's dad. Blue Apron. Get $50 off your first 2 orders plus free shipping with code STIR50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
At the San Francisco Symphony, we make music to inspire, to celebrate, to feel the room come alive and listen closely together. For wonder and discovery, for remembering where we've been and imagining what comes next. For staying connected and for joy. We make music for you. The San Francisco Symphony.
On this episode of the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, we learn about the early days of Aerosmith from one of their original roadies. This was recorded a few years ago and originally was included as a small part of a larger episode. But I thought it deserves to walk this way into the spotlight. Everything is a Primary Source is now on Teachers Pay Teachers with ready-to-use lesson plans, activities, and assessments incorporating, you guessed it, primary sources of everyday life from the last 200 years. With several free resources and everything else $5 or less, you'll be able to enhance your social studies curriculum with deep-cut documents of the past quickly and affordably. Look up Everything is a Primary Source on Teachers Pay Teachers to browse the collection. Welcome to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the show where we navigate history through popular culture. I'm your host, Eric Salmonson. I'm a social studies teacher, historian, and pop culture enthusiast. Each episode, I sit down with everyday people to discuss the media, objects, places, and events that shape us and reveal what they say about the past, as well as who we are now. The Everything is a Primary Source podcast is, therefore, your history, my history, our history through popular culture.
Free back then, the concerts, and we'd go down to the Cambridge concerts and you would see different people. Graham Nash, people from Four-Way Street, it was amazing, some of the people that you would see. Oliver Guthrie, and that's what we would do. I lived in Natick at the time. There would be 3 or 4 of us that would ride our bicycles out to Cambridge, to the Cambridge Common. We'd find a side street, lock our bikes up, and go enjoy ourselves for the day, and then ride our bikes back home.
What an incredible time, because that was like, I mean, if we were to say rock and roll started mid-50s,
right?
We started with, put a mark there. We're talking only, that's a solid 20 years, 15, 20 years of rock and roll, and yet you're still being able to access these artists. Because nowadays, if you go to a rock concert with a name even half as big as some of the ones you just mentioned, you're just dropping at least $60 for nosebleed seats in the back of some huge stadium.
God, yeah. I mean, I went and saw Elvis Costello, 2 months ago. He was at the MGM.
Yeah.
And MGM Fenway. He played there. And the money I spent on that concert, I probably could have gone to 10 concerts.
Right, yeah.
At that price.
Even with inflation. It's like, you'd still be... and so, if you don't mind just repeating that story about Aerosmith, because that was cool. I think a lot of people don't know... maybe it's general knowledge, their connection to Boston, that they're the bad boys of Boston, basically.
Well, they used to play in... they had this barn in South Natick that they used to rent. It was an old Dover rug store back then. I'm talking in the early 70s. And we were kids. We used to play Frisbee in a park out there. And they come out one time and asked us, said, look, can you move some equipment for us? So we did. We moved them to Framingham North High School, and they played out there. And then they played at, I think, the Surrey Lounge in Ashland, and another place. we went out and we helped them move their equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started getting popular. Everybody was there. The schools were packed. The bars were packed. They got a gig at Boston College, and we went to help them. When we got there, we were told we couldn't help them because it was union work.
And so like the roadies at Boston College, they had to do it.
They did all the work, and we were never used again. But when they would come by and see, they'd still wave and talk to us.
So they were nice guys.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah, they were nice to us. You know, like they very friendly, very open. They weren't malicious anyways.
Yeah.
They were very down to earth.
That's really refreshing to hear, because almost by definition, when you hear the term, people they'll use the word rock star kind of derogatory, like, right. Oh, that guy's acting like a rock star, like that. And when I hear the word rock star, Steven Tyler tends to come to mind immediately.
Right.
But I know that he does live in New Hampshire at least some of the time, out in Sunapee. I don't know his exact address for people to harass him, but and people say for the most part he's just a pretty easygoing guy. He's not. Yeah,
they're down to earth. I think being a rock star, you got to guard yourself because there's so many crazy people out
right
there. But you are what you are. If you stay natural, you're natural.
Right.
And I think that's what they were. They're just good-hearted people.
Do you think that that's kind of the product of that time period in rock and roll history? Because they were doing a lot of those groups were I know rock and roll had been around for a little while, but they were doing new things with rock that hadn't really been done. It was heavier stuff.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if they probably had to rely on, the kindness of strangers to help them out along the way. They weren't really, it hadn't established itself the way that the next decade. So you think of the 80s, like the metal bands and the hair metal guys and stuff like that. That's when you get those attitudes of.
I bet you 90% of the bands that ever started out had to start out that way.
Yeah.
Just like they did. And it's, some of them lose their personality, some of them don't.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them become divas. And some of them don't.
Right.
It's just a person. It's what you are inside.
Yeah. I guess it does come down to that. I got to think that it's like, because they were the first of that kind of sound, that there was no room for them to have that diva, and then when the groups later on in the 80s, they already started on that level of like, I want to be in a rock band so I can get girls and party all night and do all these things, where like you said, these other guys in the 70s, they worked from the bottom up. Like they had to work really, really hard
to earn it.
Yeah, because there wasn't an apparatus in place for them to just quickly, there's no MTV, so they couldn't just show up and.
There were no CDs.
Yeah.
I think 8-tracks were the biggest thing back then.
Right.
And it's either that or vinyl. And cassettes were probably just starting to kick in then.
Right.
And becoming what they were, which was a better sound. But, you didn't have the computers, all the stuff that you have nowadays.
Right.
So you had to work harder.
They did, and because they knew that what they were working with had its limits, and so they had to overcome them as much as possible. And
it's funny because when you see Aerosmith, the Beatles, bands like that, Led Zeppelin, that they're going to be famous for another 50 years. People are going to be 200 years away from these groups and still hear their music and go, wow, they were good.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. Like rock and roll, nothing against modern day rock and roll artists. Like I can't name any bands that I think are going to last as long as. And it has to do with that time period, because it was so revolutionary what they were up to in the late 60s, early 70s, that it's like that's the trajectory they went on. There's just like, I don't know what you could do with rock and roll now to make yourself stand out. It's like almost it's all been done, And and it's funny when we think that way. There's another band that pops up with a new idea. Yeah, and hopefully it's a good one, because I know they tried some stuff. There's groups that tried to integrate, like orchestra sounds and
techno stuff.
Yeah, and it's crossing over a lot with rap.
Yeah,
which Aerosmith did, but it wasn't really their that was just because their records, the rappers were using their records. They liked the beat to Walk This Way, and that's what Run DMC did. And then in the MTV age, they're like, well, the two of you need to get together because both your kinds of music are getting popular. So we want to cash in as much as possible.
You look what like guys like Chuck Berry were doing in the 50s and Otis Redding and how that still was popular in the 80s. Mm-hmm. Still developing that kind of sound.
Yeah, I saw the Beach Boys a few weeks ago. I mean, it's not really the Beach Boys anymore. It's a couple guys that were in the band and a bunch of other guys. But it's like they still sometimes write newer songs. They actually covered a Ramones song, which I thought was pretty cool, that they went full circle. And, a band that was inspired by them is now, playing their songs. But it was like the crowd, it skewed older, of course. People that grew up listening to the Beach Boys were in attendance, but everybody was enjoying the sounds of the 60s. Music that came out, in the early to mid 60s was still being danced to and cheered.
It's like me growing up, I used to love the Bee Gees when they were in the 60s.
Uh-huh.
And when I heard them change their music style over to Staying Alive, it was totally different from what they were. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. And look how popular it was.
Right.
But I thought, personally, the Bee Gees were better back then than they were.
As a more straight up, rock group rather than disco stuff. And it's always funny when you discover that kind of thing about a band. Like a band becomes popular for one particular either song or style of music, and then you're like, oh, like Fleetwood Mac.
Right.
So like Mick Fleetwood's early stuff is pretty straight up rock and roll.
Right.
And then I don't even really know how you would describe Fleetwood Mac other than just kind of like progressive rock, I guess, or blues, fusion. It's hard to label them necessarily, but that's a group that's been through a lot of different...
It's even got a twang of folk in it, too.
Yeah.
With the ballads that the girls do.
Right.
And
then, I like how Fleetwood Mac is almost kind of like an organization that people join from, they come and go. Like Lindsey Buckingham has like been in the band sometimes and other times he's not. And he has kind of like a more straight up rock and roll sound. Like whenever I think of Summer Vacation, I always think of the movie National Lampoon's Vacation with his song at the beginning, Holiday Road. And when I found out, I'm like, oh, that's the guy from Fleetwood Mac? I had no idea. It doesn't sound like one of their songs at all.
I think that was the biggest shame about Fleetwood Mac is that they messed around with each other too much, and it imploded all those relationships.
Yeah.
Imploded them, and it tore them all apart because of it. But their music, some of their music will last forever.
Yeah, it will. And I've only kind of recently gotten more into them. Like I wasn't like super into them for a while, and then my wife kept playing a lot of like their CDs and stuff. And I'm like, oh wait, I like these because they're going back to where we started with. They're authentic. It seems like it's coming from the artist, not from a producer or something saying, now you got to do this. It's like they were behind it.
Oh, they definitely did it their way.
I love having this conversation that incorporates technology so much. And for those of you listening, because you can't see it, behind us is a 18th century Cooper showing his craft, which is like the oldest trade. It's been around for centuries. And here we are with microphones talking about rock and roll and how doing a podcast. But Paul, thanks so much for stopping by and letting me put this down on my show. And I hope that listeners enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed hearing it.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.